Hey gang, we haven't even made it to Monday after Sony decided to execute the most incomprehensible Order 66 imaginable, and there's already so much more to talk about with Helldivers 2. To do a little TLDR to catch you up from the last video that I made, a game released on Steam, has an icon saying PlayStation Network accounts are required when making an account. Official PlayStation stance on every location on the web states that no, this is optional on PC games. Everyone assumes this is something related to crossplay or just straight up optional. This is reinforced as the most probable reason because Helldivers 2 is sold worldwide, and Steam pages are not controlled by the developer, which in this case is Arrowhead Studios, but the publisher, PlayStation PC LLC, or Sony. May 3rd, Sony puts out a message saying if you don't link a PSN account within 30 days, you can't play. People that can't make accounts are rightfully upset, ask what will happen to their accounts. Arrowhead confirms that they were not informed ahead of time about the announcement, and they do not have any answers yet. And that's where we left off with my last video. Since then, we've had a few updates. On Discord, we would see one of their CMs, Spitz. He would say that internal discussions were ongoing between Arrowhead and Sony regarding the linking details, and that the dev team has been universally negative with these changes. He has been assured that players in regions without PSN coverage, they won't be making the requirements mandatory. And he also says that all Steam announcements and FAQ changes are coming from Sony. Now, finally, I had mentioned this individual Spitz in my last video for making some pretty tone-deaf responses to people's complaints on Discord. He would go on to make an official apology, and this was great. I really commend him for putting this apology out. This was the right thing to do. It's really common for people to say stupid things and either delete and ignore them and act like they didn't exist. And it's really important to, when building a personal and professional reputation, to admit your mistakes and apologize when it's appropriate. So really good on him for doing this. Later that day, Sony would telegraph their broader intentions with the Helldiver 2 community by delisting the game in 177 countries and regions. Now, some people would erroneously report this as 177 countries, but in this list, there are a number of territories, like the US minor outlying islands, that would be delisted. This would personally be the last straw for me. I would submit a refund request, and as I'm in the US and my playtime is a little over 2 hours, it was denied, but that's about what I expected. Now, we would also see some major tomfoolery out of the PSN accounts that are out of Ukraine. Now, in Ukraine, you can't make a PSN account unless you have a PS4 or a PS5. So you would have users there being told that, yeah, you have Helldivers 2. Yes, PSN is supported in this country, but you cannot make an account online. Just go buy a console. The country's being shelled by 120mm artillery from Russia, and now Sony's calling in their own 120mm barrage on their Ukraine player base. Fuck Sony, fuck Russia, Slava Ukraini. Now, on May 5th, more tone-deaf messages would be brought to the attention of the community at large from their lead community manager, Baskinator, that would say, well, we always knew this day would get here, and it's going about how I expected. I'm actually happy for us to be able to take action against player reports that make the game safer across the board, personally. Now, again, this whole idea that you can't ban people when they're on Steam is total horseshit. That is not a thing. Now, Baskinator had already been under fire for some previous tweets that they had made that were a bit racist and sexist. And I had hoped that after the company had talked to her, that she would shape up and stop acting like a fucking idiot. However, that didn't happen. And looking at this, if after all of that, she is still sitting there making these massively tone-deaf messages saying things like she's happy that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of their users are not going to be able to play the game in 30 days, that really shows what kind of a leader she is. We would also see another community manager by the name of Purple Squidgen slandering Mark Kern, who goes by Grums on Twitter, with the following. He would then say that anyone that was a fan of him or defended Grums in the Discord would be banned. And when this behavior was called out by members of the community as being really unprofessional, he would say that slander implies it was a lie. Now, with these things brought up, to put things into context, I'm now going to talk a little bit about how important it is for you to have standards and expectations set for your community management members. It's important to set limits on what they can say as representatives of the company, how they should respond to player feedback, uniform standards for punishments for community members, and crisis management in general. Now, a great example of good content manager is the Wendy's Twitter account. They're super sassy. However, if you were to actually have an issue, they would assist you with whatever issue they had. One thing the company of Wendy's would not like to see is if someone were making a serious complaint, like finding out that they had glass in their food and simply having the Wendy's Twitter account present say something like lol skill issue. Would it be hilarious? Yes. Would it look bad for Wendy's? Yes. It would take a local issue that may not even be real, and it would magnify it into a major brand issue. Now, some basic rules for what you shouldn't say is usually don't say things that are racist, sexist, political, or religious. Employees will have their own personal belief systems. However, as an employee that's representing the company, you need to take those belief systems and you need to leave it at the door so they do not affect your job. And for crisis management, it is extremely important to set up a system where employees that interface with your user base have a location to hear the talking points about what they need to say to the community members. Now, this can be a private Discord, it can be Slack, WhatsApp, or God forbid, Microsoft Teams. Your community managers should all be reading from the same script. In this case, it would have been perfectly acceptable if they said that the statement was put out by Sony and they don't have answers for these questions and that they would get the answers to us as soon as they found them out. Instead, we've had multiple members of their community management team jump out and belittle huge portions of the user base, plastering all of these messages all over Twitter because it's tone deaf, unprofessional, and awful. This is a great example of what happens when you do not have the appropriate standards set up for a community management team. And it shows why it's so important for having these standards set up before you have a crisis like Arrowhead is going through right now. You want your team to react in the way they are trained when these crises occur. Any company crisis is going to lead to heightened emotions. So having standards to fall back and point to during these times is really important to provide stability for your employees during that time. It's so important. Now, Arrowhead didn't set those standards and expectations up beforehand, and it shows. If you're letting your CMs shoot from the hip, you're going to catch strays. And that's what Arrowhead's doing right now. They're catching strays. Now, it is particularly apparent through all of this that their lead community manager, Baskinator, is not someone that is a good candidate for leading this team. If you are a lead, you lead by example. And if you don't want to lead by example, then you need to leave that position. Now, I've been a game developer for a long ass time. And if I'm working my ass off on a feature that I want my users to enjoy, and I find out that my users, instead of looking forward to that feature, are pissed off because some social media grunt couldn't get their fucking act together, I'm going to be pretty fucking pissed. And if these CMs are using Baskinator as a measure of how to behave as a community manager at this company, then I can't really blame these community managers for their lack of professionalism. But I can for damn sure blame Baskinator, who is the lead that should be leading them, for their lack of professionalism and incompetence at leading this community management team. Now, as displeased as I am with Baskinator and their underlings, fixing the team is not going to be the focus of Arrowhead in the days coming forward. Their CEO would admit that this was a requirement that had been asked for 6 months before launch, but the team was unaware that Sony was selling the game in regions without PSN access. It wasn't easy to re-enable it while the server devs were fixing the servers early in the days of the release. And finally, that Sony wanted it re-enabled to help with moderation. And despite concerns for the backlash, Sony pushed for it without knowing what to do with the players from the unsupported regions. Now, from this statement, I am getting an impression that Sony wanted to use manpower from some kind of internal team to assist them with moderation. You had your CM saying, oh, it wasn't possible for, and that's just bullshit. However, if you have an internal team where their tool is set up so that they can ban people with PSN accounts, that on its face would make sense. However, this whole thing could have been solved if anyone that was playing Helldivers just had a guest account set up for them and their Steam info was stuck into that account. Have it just be an internal only thing. so that when they finally linked their actual PSN account, it would just merge those two accounts. It's super, super common, and that is the gold standard for any kind of free-to-play app that you find on your phones, because it just makes sense and it works. So this whole idea that it wasn't possible without this happening, it's bullshit. They could have done it. They just had to put in a little bit of work and it would have been fine. Instead, they decided to choose the dumbest solution that they could have possibly chosen for this situation. All right, guys. Some breaking news as I was recording this. PlayStation would put out a tweet at 9 p.m. PST on May 5th that reads the following. Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still learning what's the best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated with future plans. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought that this was going to be nothing but shitty news going forward for the next week. I didn't think there would be any kind of silver lining. But with the power of freedom, democracy, and us voting with our reviews and our displeasure towards Sony, Sony managed to hear us. Sony, of all companies, managed to hear us. I have not seen an update on SteamDB yet that the disabled regions from this week were re-enabled. I'm hoping that we're going to see it in the next 24 hours. Yeah, this feels pretty fucking good. Now, if you've made it this far, I super appreciate you coming by. I'll be here talking about games and other game adjacent stuff in the future. So I hope to see you again. And yeah, democracy protects.